Dr. Myra Holden pressed her palm against the reinforced viewport of Research Station Kepler 9, watching the violent crimson auroras dance across Pharaoh 7's atmosphere. The moon's surface writhed with volcanic activity, its jagged peaks belching sulfurous clouds that painted the sky in shades of amber and rust. Somewhere beneath those treacherous slopes lay the sacred breeding grounds of the Scaranth, creatures so lethal that even seasoned xenobiologists spoke of them in hushed whispers. Still, obsessing over the murder cats, Dr. Chen Wei approached, his reflection ghosting beside hers in the transparent aluminum. His tone carried the easy familiarity of someone who'd shared countless nights monitoring alien biosignatures in the darkness between stars. Myra didn't turn from the window. They are not murder cats, Chen. They are apex predators with complex social structures and an acid for blood, retractable bone spikes, and a documented kill rate of 100% against anything that threatens their territory. Chen's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too many colonial expeditions return in body bags. The Galactic Survey classified them as approach prohibited for good reason. The station's lights flickered as another seismic tremor rolled through Pharaoh 7's crust. These moonquakes had been increasing in frequency and intensity over the past month, turning the already dangerous world into a powder keg. Myra's instruments detected the Scaranth moving deeper into their cavern systems, following ancestral patterns that predated human spaceflight by millennia. Look at this, Myra pulled up a holographic display showing thermal readings from the moon's surface. The breeding chambers are showing increased activity. The females are nesting. Chen studied the data, his expression shifting from casual dismissal to professional concern. Myra, you're not thinking, I'm thinking that we are witnessing something unprecedented. The Scaranth only breed once every 7 standard years. The cubs are born completely defenseless, requiring constant temperature regulation and specialized nutrition. If something happens to those chambers, another tremor shook the station, this one strong enough to rattle equipment and send coffee cups sliding across tables. Emergency lights bathed the observation deck in strobing red, and somewhere in the distance, an alarm began its monotonous wail. That's not our problem, Chen said firmly. Our mission parameters are clear: observe, document, and maintain a safe distance of no less than 50 kilometers from any Scaranth territory. Myra finally turned from the window, her dark eyes reflecting the same intensity that had driven her through 15 years of xenobiological research. Her colleagues often joked that she cared more about alien species than her own, but they'd never understood the deeper truth: she saw potential for connection where others saw only danger. What if we could help them? She asked quietly. Help them? Chen's laugh held no humor. Myra, these creatures have killed every diplomatic envoy, every research team, every mining expedition that's ever set foot on Pharaoh 7. They don't want our help. They want us gone. The station's communication array crackled to life, broadcasting an automated distress signal on an ancient frequency band. Both scientists froze, listening to the weak, repeating transmission that seemed to originate from somewhere on the moon's surface. That's not a Scaranth signal, Myra whispered, her fingers flying over the analysis console. It's an old Earth satellite beacon. Pre-colonial era. Impossible. There were no Earth missions to this system before the Galactic Survey. But the data didn't lie. Buried beneath layers of volcanic ash and time, something human was calling for help from the very heart of Scaranth territory. As if the universe itself was testing the boundaries between species, between fear and compassion, between the known and the unimaginable. Outside, Pharaoh's 7 continued its violent dance, unaware that its trembling surface was about to become the stage for a moment that would reshape humanity's relationship with the deadliest creatures in the galaxy. The shuttle's engines whined in protest as Myra guided it through Pharaoh's 7's turbulent atmosphere. Every instinct screamed it had to turn back, to return to the safety of the research station where Chen was undoubtedly pacing the command deck and muttering about reckless xenobiologists with death wishes. But the beacon's signal had grown stronger, more urgent, as if whatever lay buried beneath the moon's surface knew that time was running out. Her exosuit's environmental systems hummed quietly, maintaining a delicate balance between protection and mobility. She'd modified it extensively, adding thermal regulators, chemical neutralizers, and medical equipment that any rational person would consider overkill for a routine survey mission, the official designation she'd logged to avoid triggering Command's automatic mission abort protocols. The shuttle's sensors painted a grim picture of the landing zone. Massive fissures spiderwebbed across the volcanic plains, venting superheated gases that would cook an unprotected human in seconds. But there, nestled between 2 towering obsidian spires, lay the entrance to the Scaranth breeding caverns. The ancient lava tubes had been carved and shaped by countless generations, transformed into a labyrinthine nursery that had never known the presence of an outsider, until now. Myra set the shuttle down on a relatively stable outcropping 3 kilometers from the cavern entrance. The moment she powered down the engines, the moon's savage beauty enveloped her. Rivers of molten rock cascaded down distant slopes like liquid sunlight, while geysers of mineral-rich steam painted abstract patterns against the amber sky. It was a world of extremes, where beauty and death danced together in perfect, terrifying harmony. Her boots crunched against volcanic glass as she made her way toward the cavern entrance, following the beacon's signal through valleys carved by ancient eruptions. Every step took her deeper into territory that had claimed the lives of dozens of explorers, researchers, and fortune seekers. The Scaranth had built their reputation on the bones of those who dared trespass on their sacred grounds. The cavern entrance loomed before her like the mouth of some primordial beast. Carved symbols, part warning, part blessing, covered the smooth stone walls, their meaning lost to time but their intent unmistakable. This place is not for you. Myra activated her suit's translator, hoping the AI might decipher some meaning from the ancient glyphs. Instead, she heard something that made her blood freeze, the distant sound of distress calls echoing from deep within the cavern system. Not the mechanical beeping of the buried beacon, but something organic, desperate, and utterly alien. She pressed forward into the darkness, her suit's lights cutting through shadows that seemed to swallow illumination. The temperature rose steadily as she descended, and her instruments detected complex chemical signatures that suggested the presence of biological material, lots of it. Then she saw them. The first Scaranth cubs were huddled against the cavern wall, their chitinous shells barely formed, their bioluminescent patches flickering weakly like dying stars. They were smaller than she'd expected, no larger than Earth-house cats, but their anatomy was clearly designed for a predatory future. Retractable claws, oversized sensory organs, and the telltale bone ridges that would eventually become the spikes that made adult Scaranth so feared. One of the cubs was trapped beneath a fallen boulder, its rear legs clearly crushed. Another struggled to breathe, its respiratory system apparently damaged by volcanic gases. A third lay motionless, its bioluminescent patches dark and still. Myra's training kicked in, overriding her fear with the cool professionalism that had made her one of the galaxy's leading xenobiologists. She approached the trapped cub slowly, speaking in soft, measured tones despite knowing it couldn't understand her words. Sometimes, she'd learned, intent mattered more than language. "Easy. There, little one," she whispered, kneeling beside the boulder. "I'm here to help." The cub's eyes, large, intelligent, and filled with pain, fixed on her with an intensity that seemed far too mature for such a young creature. It didn't struggle as she ran her scanner over its injuries, didn't try to bite or claw as she began. The delicate process of moving the boulder, behind her, deeper in the cavern, something roared. The sound that erupted from the cavern's depths was unlike anything in Myra's 15 years of xenobiological research. It wasn't the territorial roar of a predator or the warning call of a threatened animal, it was something far more primal, more devastating. It was the cry of a parent who had found strangers near their helpless young. Myra's hands never stopped moving as she worked to free the trapped cub. Her scanner indicated severe trauma to the creature's lower spine, but nothing that couldn't be treated with the right combination of medical intervention and species-appropriate care. The cub's breathing was labored but steady, its bioluminescent patches pulsing in what her instruments suggested was a pattern of distress mixed with trust. "That's it," she murmured, carefully applying a stabilizing compound to the cub's injuries. "I know it hurts, but you're going to be okay." The approaching sounds grew louder, the scrape of claws against stone, the heavy breathing of massive creatures moving through narrow passages, and underneath it all, a low harmonic thrumming that seemed to resonate in her bones. The adult Scaranth were coming, and they were furious. Myra had studied their anatomy extensively from the remains of previous encounters. An adult Scaranth stood nearly 3 meters tall at the shoulder, with a muscular build that combined feline grace with reptilian power. Their bone spikes could extend to over 1/2 meter in length, and their blood contained corrosive compounds that could eat through most standard protective gear. They were evolution's answer to the question, what if a predator had no natural enemies? The first adult appeared at the cavern entrance like a nightmare-given form. Its eyes, larger and more intelligent than its offspring's, burned with a cold fire that spoke of millennia of genetic dominance. The bone spikes along its spine were fully extended, creating a crown of deadly points that caught and reflected Myra's suit lights. When it opened its mouth, revealing rows of teeth designed for tearing through both flesh and metal, the sound that emerged was part roar, part challenge, and entirely terrifying. Behind it came 2 more adults, their movements coordinated with the precision of a military unit. They spread out, blocking every possible escape route while keeping their attention fixed on the small human who dared to touch their young. Myra slowly stood, her hands visible and empty. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, to do anything except stand there and wait for death. But her training in xenobiology had taught her something crucial. The moments of greatest danger were often the moments of greatest opportunity for communication. "I'm not here to hurt them," she said quietly, knowing the words meant nothing to the creatures but hoping her tone would convey peaceful intent. "I'm here to help." The lead Scaranth, likely the cub's mother, based on her size and the way the others deferred to her, took a step forward. Her claws left deep gouges in the stone floor, and her body temperature was high enough that Myra could feel the heat radiation through her suit's environmental systems. For a moment that stretched into eternity, predator and prey regarded each other across a gulf of species, evolution, and understanding. Then the Scaranth mother did something that would have been impossible to predict. She looked at her injured cubs, then back at Myra, and her bone spikes retracted slightly, not a sign of submission, but a gesture of consideration. Myra moved slowly, deliberately, kneeling beside the second injured cub. This one's breathing was even more labored, its bioluminescent patches flickering erratically. Without breaking eye contact with the mother, she began to examine the creature's respiratory system, her scanner painting a picture of damaged gill slits and fluid-filled breathing chambers. The adult Scaranth watched with an intensity that felt like being examined under a microscope. Every movement Myra made was catalogued, analyzed, and judged. The slightest wrong gesture could trigger an attack that would end her life in seconds, but instead of attacking, the mother began to make a different sound, a low, rhythmic humming that seemed to calm the injured cubs. The other adults took up the song, creating a harmonic resonance that filled the cavern with something that sounded almost like a lullaby. Myra's instruments detected changes in the cubs' vital signs, decreased stress indicators, improved oxygen absorption, and what appeared to be accelerated healing responses. The Scaranth had evolved their own form of medical treatment, using harmonic frequencies to stimulate their young's natural recovery processes. She looked up at the mother, understanding passing between them without words. The adult Scaranth had made a choice that went against every instinct, every evolutionary imperative. She was allowing a potential threat to remain near her most vulnerable offspring because that threat was helping them heal. Trust, Myra realized, wasn't just a human concept. It was something far more universal, far more precious than she had ever imagined. The hours that followed blurred together in a symphony of careful movements, whispered reassurances, and the gradual building of something unprecedented, cooperation between human and Scaranth. Myra worked with the methodical precision of a trauma surgeon, treating each cub's injuries while the adults maintained their protective circle around the makeshift medical station. The first cub, the one trapped beneath the boulder, had suffered spinal compression that would have been fatal without intervention. Myra's portable medical kit contained synthetic bone grafts designed for emergency field treatment, but adapting them for Scaranth physiology required delicate recalibration of her instruments. The mother watched every procedure with the intensity of a medical resident, her large eyes tracking each movement of Myra's hands. The vertebrae are more flexible than mammalian structures, Myra explained aloud, knowing the words meant nothing to her audience but finding comfort in the familiar rhythm of teaching. The injury compression here, if I can just there. The moment the synthetic graft took hold, the cub's bioluminescent patches flared brighter, and it lifted its head for the first time since Myra had found it. The mother's reaction was immediate. An unmistakable, a deep, thrumming purr that resonated through the cavern walls. The sound was taken up by the other adults, creating a harmonic celebration that seemed to make the very air dance. The second cub's respiratory issues proved more challenging. Its gill slits were clogged with volcanic ash and mineral deposits, and its breathing chambers were filled with fluid that threatened to drown it from the inside. Myra had to adapt equipment designed for human lung treatment, scaling down the suction apparatus and adjusting the chemical balance of the clearing solution. "Hold still, little one," she whispered, gently inserting the modified breathing tube. "This might feel strange, but it's going to help." The cub's eyes, so much like its mother's, fixed on her with an expression of trust that took her breath away. Here was a creature barely hours old, genetically programmed to become one of the galaxy's most feared predators, placing its life in the hands of an alien species it had never seen before. The procedure took 3 hours. 3 hours of careful suction, chemical treatment, and respiratory support while the cub's parents watched with the intensity of parents everywhere, desperate, hopeful, and ready to kill anyone who caused their child pain. When the last of the fluid cleared and the cub drew its first clean breath, The celebration that erupted from the adults was deafening, but it was the third cub that broke Myra's heart. The smallest of the three had suffered what appeared to be developmental complications, its bioluminescent patches dark and its breathing so shallow it was barely detectable. Myra's scans revealed a cardiac abnormality that was rapidly proving fatal, a condition that would have been treatable in a human infant but was beyond her current capabilities to address in an unknown alien species. She knelt beside the tiny creature, her hands hovering over its still form. The medical equipment in her kit was sophisticated but finite, and she had already used most of her supplies on the other two cubs. The third cub needed surgical intervention that she simply couldn't provide in a volcanic cavern with improvised tools. The mother seemed to understand. She approached slowly, her massive head lowering until it was level with Myra's. For a moment, human and Scarinth breathed the same air, sharing the same space, united in their helplessness before the fragility of life. Then the mother did something extraordinary. She began to sing, not the harmonic purring that had accompanied the successful treatments, but something deeper, more mournful. It was a song of grief, of loss, of the terrible knowledge that sometimes love isn't enough to save what matters most. Myra felt tears tracking down her cheeks inside her helmet. She had dedicated her life to understanding alien species, to building bridges between worlds and cultures, but in this moment, she understood that some experiences transcended species boundaries. The pain of losing a child was universal, written in the language of love that every parent spoke regardless of their evolutionary origin. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." The mother's response was to gently touch Myra's helmet with one massive claw, not a threat, but a gesture of acknowledgement. Perhaps even gratitude. The human had saved two of her children, and that was more than anyone else had ever done for the Scarinth. The third cub's breathing finally stilled. The adults began a new song, a funeral dirge that spoke of honor, memory, and the continuation of life even in the face of loss. It was beautiful and terrible and utterly alien, yet Myra found herself humming along, adding her voice to the harmony of grief and hope. In that moment, something changed forever. The barriers between species didn't disappear, they were transformed into something permeable, something that could be crossed by those willing to risk everything for the sake of life itself. 3 months after the events in the Scarinth breeding caverns, Dr. Myra Holden stood before the Galactic Council's Xenobiological Committee, her presentation displaying images that would have been impossible to obtain just a year earlier. The holographic projections showed healthy Scarinth cubs playing under the watchful eyes of their parents, their bioluminescent patches creating patterns of joy and contentment that her instruments could now translate with remarkable accuracy. The implications extend far beyond simple medical intervention, she explained to the assembled representatives from dozens of worlds. We've established a communication protocol based on harmonic resonance, body language, and biochemical indicators. The Scarinth have developed what can only be described as a primitive form of pictographic writing, specifically to communicate medical information about their young. Admiral Reese, the committee's chairman, leaned forward in his seat. "Dr. Holden, are you suggesting that these are creatures have actually requested human medical assistance?" "Not requested, Admiral. Demanded." Myra's smile carried the weight of a dozen successful medical interventions. Last week, a Scarinth matriarch traveled over 300 kilometers to reach our medical station, carrying a cub with a genetic condition that would have been fatal without treatment. She waited outside our perimeter for 18 hours until I arrived. The chamber erupted in murmurs of disbelief. The Scaranth had been the galaxy's most notorious isolationists, killing anyone who approached their territory. The idea that they would actively seek out human contact contradicted decades of xenobiological theory. The trust they've placed in us isn't based on our technology or our medical knowledge, Myra continued. It's based on something much simpler. We proved that we care about what matters most to them. Their children. Dr. Chen Wei, now stationed permanently on Pharaoh's 7 as part of the expanded research team, activated the next series of images. The Scaranth have begun teaching us their traditional healing methods. Their harmonic therapy can accelerate bone growth by up to 300% and has proven effective in treating respiratory conditions across multiple species. We are not just providing medical care, we're participating in a genuine cultural exchange. The image shifted to show a Scaranth adult working alongside a human medic, both focused on a young cub that was clearly thriving under their combined care. The sight of a 3-meter-tall apex predator gently cradling a medical scanner while a human technician monitored vital signs was perhaps the most remarkable interspecies cooperation in recorded history. The other galactic species have taken notice, Admiral Reese observed. The Centauri Trade Federation has requested similar medical exchange programs with aggressive species in their territory. The Andromedan Collective wants to establish a xenobiological research station based on your protocols. Myra nodded. The Scaranth have indicated they would be willing to serve as intermediaries with other so-called hostile species. They understand something that we are only beginning to learn. True strength isn't measured by your ability to kill, but by your willingness to preserve life. As if summoned by her words, the chamber's communication system activated, broadcasting a harmonic pattern that had become familiar to everyone on the committee. The Scaranth had developed a specific song for communicating with humans, a melody that conveyed greeting, respect, and something that could only be described as affection. That's Kethara, Myra explained, using the name the Scaranth had given to the matriarch who had first trusted her with her cubs. She's calling to let us know that her latest clutch is ready for their first medical examination. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the chamber. The galaxy's most feared predators had become protective parents who wouldn't let their children receive medical care from anyone except the fragile ones who keep our blood alive, the Scaranth's term for humans. The implications for interspecies relations are staggering, Dr. Chen added. We've discovered that aggression and protectiveness aren't signs of hostility, they are signs of deep emotional investment. The species we've labeled as a hostile aren't necessarily enemies. They are parents, guardians, protectors of something they value more than their own lives. Myra looked out at the assembled representatives, each from worlds that had struggled with their own hostile species encounters. The Scaranth have taught us that trust isn't earned through strength or dominance. It's earned through care, sacrifice, and respect for what others hold sacred. They trusted us with their most precious possessions, their children, because we proved that we valued those lives as much as they did. As the committee began its deliberations on expanding the medical exchange program, Myra felt her communicator pulse with an incoming message from Pharaoh's 7. The text, translated from Scaranth pictographs, was simple but profound. The small ones are singing. They remember the gentle hands that made them whole. When will the healer return? Outside the chamber's vast windows, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, unchanged by the small miracle of understanding that had blossomed between two very different forms of life. But for Myra, those stars no longer represented the cold emptiness of space, they represented the infinite possibilities that emerged when beings chose compassion over conquest, healing over harm. The Scaranth had taught humanity that the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy weren't those with the sharpest claws or the deadliest weapons. They were those who had something precious to protect, and the wisdom to recognize when others shared that same protective instinct. In the end, what made deadly creatures trust humans with their offspring wasn't humanity's medical knowledge or technological prowess. It was something much simpler and infinitely more powerful, the recognition that love transcends species, that care knows no boundaries, and that the greatest trust is earned not through dominance, but through the gentle hands that choose to heal rather than harm. The stars continued their eternal dance, but now they danced to a new rhythm, one that harmonized the songs of Earth with the lullabies of Pharaohs, 7, creating a melody of hope that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come.